says auto stream is disabled, so I can do it. It says I'm live. So let's see if I'm actually live. Hello and welcome to the first ever Spinster's Library live wrap-up.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Tech support says I'm actually live, so hello. Today I want to wrap up Jane Austen July 2025. I should probably wait until someone tells me if they can hear me or not. Oh, great. Someone's just done that. So thank you. You can hear me, you can see me, so let's get started. I'm Claudia, and I had a very eventful and busy Jane Austen July in that I read some books, I made some videos, I watched some stuff, and today I want to tell you about this. I debated doing a Jane Austen July wrap-up because I haven't been doing wrap-ups really for the past 2 years or so. I just prefer to do individual book reviews. And for the books that I've read this Jane Austen July, I will also be doing individual book reviews. But also I kind of like the idea of doing a little wrap-up just to end the month with, to have a little sort of end point to what has probably been my busiest and most fun Jane Austen July since 2019 or something like that. Yay, there's already a few people in chat, so hello everyone. Thank you for the compliments to the eyeshadow. I've been enjoying the neon eyeshadows lately, and I thought this one looks good with the presentation that I've prepared. Yes, because I have made a PowerPoint for this. Well, not a PowerPoint, I made it on Canva, but you get the idea. So I suggest we just get started, and you can tell me in chat what you've been reading. Let's just talk about Jane Austen July. And then, unfortunately, it's over for another year. So let's see what people are saying. Greetings from Daddy Tilney. Oh, we love Daddy Tilney. You know, he's evil and all that, but oh, that reminds me, I should probably put a bit of a spoiler warning on this video because I fully expect that we're not going to be able to hold back. We will be talking about Jane Austen's books. So I am going to just put out a spoiler warning for all of Jane Austen's novels, because who knows what we'll end up talking about. I'm going to try and not spoiler the other books that I'll be talking about, so the books that aren't by Jane Austen. I think we can be pretty certain that we'll be talking about Jane Austen's books. So I don't know. Be aware of that if you haven't read her works. Yeah, so Parkraj says, I should have done something for Jane Austen July. Well, yeah, you should have read some Jane Austen. But you know what? You can read Jane Austen the other 11 months of the year as well. Michelle asks, any views on Jane Austen's bookshelf? I haven't read it. I knew at the beginning of the month that everyone was going to be reading Jane Austen's bookshelf. So this is a book by Rebecca Romney that's just come out, and it's been hyped all over the internet. Everyone had it on their Jane Austen July TBR. This is a book about specifically the female authors that we know Jane Austen read. And it's a sort of look at those authors. So this is, like I said, I haven't read the book, but I'm pretty sure it includes authors like Charlotte Lennox, like Maria Edgeworth, you know, authors that influenced Jane Austen and her writing. I am certain that I will read Jane Austen's bookshelf sooner or later, and I fully expect it'll end up on my TBR for next year's Jane Austen July. This year, I had a different book on my TBR for the non-fiction challenge, and we'll get to that in a bit. Let's see what chat is saying first before we get into that. Claudia is in fact pronounced Claudia, like yesterday was cloudy, but today is Claudia. It might rain. And Pakrash asks, have you read any contemporary version of Jane Austen's novels like Pride and Premeditation? I've not read Pride and Premeditation, but I have in fact read quite a few retellings of Jane Austen novels. And this year in Jane Austen July, I read 2 retellings of Jane Austen novels. Let's just get into the wrap-up. And we'll just keep an eye on the chat as we go. This is going to be quite casual. Got myself a little drink here, and yeah, let's get started. Let's hope that if I press this button, no, of course it didn't work straight away. There we go. So the first part of this wrap-up is going to be about the books I read. And we'll start with the Jane Austen book. I read Emma this year. Emma was our group read. For those of you who haven't done Jane Austen July before, you might not know this, but we always pick 2 group reads to look at in the month of July. This year, we decided on just the one because Emma is a very long novel. I don't know if it's Jane Austen's longest novel. Mansfield Park certainly feels like it's about twice as long as Emma, but it's definitely a longer novel. So we decided to just read Emma as a group read. We've been having some fantastic discussions in the Jane Austen July Discord group, and we've been reading Emma at a pace of 2 chapters a day. Emma always features second in my Jane Austen rankings, right after Pride and Prejudice, because, as you know, I am a basic bitch. But Emma has always been second place. And then every time that I read a different Jane Austen book, I'm like, you know what? Maybe Persuasion's actually my second favourite. Maybe Northanger Abbey is actually my second favourite. But then when I get back to Emma, I understand why it's second best. It's such a good novel. It's definitely requires some patience because it is a very long novel. And, you know, some might say it could do with another round of editing. But I love the amount of detail we get in Emma about Jane Austen's society. Emma, and I've noticed this on this reread more than on any other, features characters not from all walks of life, but from more walks of life than your average Jane Austen novel. We get actually named servants, you know, like James the coachman, or the shopkeeper whose name, weirdly, I have forgotten. We get the Bateses, Mrs. and Miss Bates, and her niece, Jane Fairfax, who are the sort of genteel classes fallen into poverty. You get a lot more of those societal nuances than you get in most Jane Austen novels. And I think that's due to Emma being such a big book, but set in a geographically very small area of the country, because Highbury, the village that the entirety of Emma takes place in, except, of course, for the one Box Hill scene, Emma is set on such a small space, but that gives more space for the individual characters and for their relationships to really shine. And I love that about Emma. Let's see what Chan has to say about Emma before we continue. Oh, thank you for the compliments on the eyeshadow. I'm really quite pleased with it. I got a new eyeshadow palette from NYX, which has a lot of really bright colors, so I've been enjoying that. And look who's joined me here. I don't even know if you can. Oh, yay! Well done on the software not cutting out Minerva. Say hello, Minerva. So, yeah, someone's mentioned Jane Austen Wrecked My Life. We'll get to that later because I wanted to watch it, but I didn't get to. Anyway, back to Emma. I love it so much. And on a reread, you can pay more attention to those little details, because the first time you read Emma, you're not aware that you're reading a bit of a mystery. You're not aware that there is a whole other story going on behind the scenes that Emma isn't aware of, and that you as the reader also aren't aware of. And the second time you read that, you pick up on those little hints. You know, why is Frank Churchill behaving the way he is? why does he show up, where he shows up, and when he shows up, and so on. So you get a little more of the mystery that's happening in Emma. Minerva has just jumped off the desk, so maybe she'll join us again. And then the third, fourth, and fifth time you read it, you know about the main plot of Emma and matchmaking and Mr. Knightley and so on. You know about the secondary plot of, Harriet Smith, Mr. Elton, all of those characters trying to settle into their relationships. You know about the mystery plot, the secret that's going to be unveiled right at the end. And then you can really pick up on those details of society, how Emma sees her place in society, how she sees other people. You notice details like how she never calls Harriet by her first how Harriet never calls Emma by her first name, but always refers to her as Miss Woodhouse, and Emma always refers to Harriet just as Harriet. But then Emma is so offended when Mrs. Elton does the same thing and first names people that Emma thinks she doesn't have the right to first name. And so on. There's a lot of detail in how people behave in Emma, and I just find that so fascinating. So we have some opinions on Emma in chat. Michelle says, Emma is not my favorite heroine. The way she speaks to people bothers me. I feel like she treats Harriet as a pet. Yeah, absolutely. The friendship between Emma and Harriet is not an equal one by any means. Emma likes being important. And I mean that in a negative way. She likes being the lady of the house. She likes being the queen bee of the village. She likes being the most talented musician, which is why it bothers her when Jane Fairfax shows up. She likes being the first in line, which is why it bothers her when Mrs. Elton shows up. And the way that she treats Harriet is entirely self-centered. She doesn't want Harriet to marry Mr. Martin, not because she doesn't think that Harriet would be unhappy with him, but because she feels that she can no longer associate with her if she degrades herself to such a marriage. So Emma's entirely self-centered. And I find that makes her a much more fascinating main character, than, for example, the very virtuous Fanny Price in Mansfield Park. I also love all the comic relief characters in Emma because they all have nuance. It's easy to see someone like Miss Bates as having the same sort of role as, say, Mr. Collins, but actually Miss Bates is a really three-dimensional character. And you can say that about most characters in Emma, even characters such as Mr. Elton, Mr. Woodhouse, Mrs. Elton. So yeah, what I'm saying is I really enjoyed my reread of Emma. I'm not going to make a dedicated review video about Emma. Maybe at some point I might make some sort of video essay or discussion video that centers on Emma. But I enjoyed my reread. I listened to the audiobook narrated by the excellent Juliet Stevenson. And it reminded me why Emma always ranks second in my own personal Jane Austen novel rankings. And Michelle says, imagine Miss Bates as a detective. She knows everything. She is incredibly observant, which is also something that Katie pointed out in her video about Miss Bates, but we'll get to that later as well. Let's just move on to the next Jane Austen book that I read, and that is Sanditon. And it was a bittersweet experience. I have procrastinated reading Sanditon for years. I've had it on my Jane Austen July TBR several times. And even when Sanditon was actually the group read, I didn't read it. And reading it this year reminded me why, because there's not much left of Jane Austen for me to discover. And Sanditon is such a big part of the non-canonical works of Jane Austen that it was kind of sad when you get to the point, like 7 chapters. No, it's actually, I think it's 12 chapters, but 12 very short chapters. And it suddenly stops. Because I can tell that Sanditon could have been a masterpiece. This is another book that I'm not going to do a dedicated review video about because there just isn't enough of it for me to make a whole video about. But I loved the setting. I loved the characters as we're introduced to them. I actually really loved the prose. It felt more descriptive than most other Jane Austen books. You get a real sense of place that's so strong. It's even more strong than Highbury and Emma, which I've already said as a setting is everything. But the way that Sanditon is described and through the eyes of the characters is just really vivid. And this is one where I'm quite keen to watch the ITV adaptation of it. I'm fully aware the ITV adaptation is going to take this as a jumping off point and then do its own thing, right? Like, even in these 12 chapters, all you get is exposition. There's no actual plot happening yet. And I still really enjoyed reading that. It's a fantastic holiday read as well. I took it on a bike tour I did with Bill and a friend to a nearby lake, and I read it there, and it felt like just the right setting. Obviously, the best of reading this by the seaside, but if you haven't got a seaside nearby, then any body of water will do. So yeah, I expect I'll have more to say about this after I've watched the adaptation and seen in which direction they take what feels like the beginning of a really good story. And it's just so sad that Jane Austen never got to finish this one. Okay, let's move on to the next read. That is the book that I wanted to read instead of Jane Austen's bookshelf. This is another one that most people who participate in Jane Austen July regularly read about 6 years ago. I am not the biggest enjoyer of biography as a genre, and so I haven't read it until this year. I was just never that interested in Jane Austen as a person. That sounds so horrible. I'm just not a fan of biography. Then this year, I actually ended up seeing Lucy Worsley give a talk that's based on the research she did for this book. And that made me want to read her book. She's a really good public speaker. It was a really fun evening watching her give a presentation about Jane Austen and using her book as the jumping off point for that presentation. What I loved about Lucy Worsley's presentation is that she does PowerPoint exactly like you expect a sort of Gen X history teacher to do. It was adorable. But yeah, the presentation was really good. I bought the book. I wanted to get the book signed. So I bought the book in a bookshop the day that I went to see her. And then noticed too late that she wasn't signing books, but she was selling signed books. I thought, I'm not going to buy a second copy of a biography just to get Lucy Worsley's signature in it. Anyway, so I didn't finish it. I haven't DNF'd it. I just haven't finished it yet. I'm sorry. I'm still reading this book because, as I said, I'm not the biggest fan of biography, and therefore it's taking a little longer. I think I'm about maybe 100 pages in, and it's a good biography. It's let's fly here. It's well written. It's entertaining. It's easy to read, but it's still a biography. And so, if I'm deciding between reading that or literally any novel, I will pick literally any novel. But it is an interesting biography. I can understand why BookTube loves it. I can recommend it even after only having read a quarter of it. And yeah, over the next few weeks, I'll continue to read it. And when I'm finished with it, I probably will do a review video about it. So, these are my very unfinished thoughts. Jane Austen at Home, great biography. You'll love it if you like biographies. I don't like biographies, but I'm still enjoying this a surprising amount, considering I don't like biographies. Let's move on. to the next. The next book I read, this is for the challenge in Jane Austen July that either wants you to read a retelling or a sequel or fan fiction type novel set in the world of Jane Austen, or more broadly, a work of historical fiction set in Jane Austen's time. I usually pick the historical fiction option for this because I don't really care for what I'm just considering fan fiction, so novels that are set within the world of Jane Austen's books. Because when you have an author attempting to write a book about characters that Jane Austen created, there is an uncanny valley where you can tell that this is supposed to be, I don't know, Kitty Bennet or whatever, but it's just not quite right. Modern authors aren't going to sound like Jane Austen, and they aren't going to interpret the characters in a way that feels right to me. So I gave up on that style of retelling a few years ago. Even the classics of the genre, such as Longbourn by Joe Baker, which a lot of people really adore, it just didn't do it for me. I can, admit that it's a well-written book, and I can see why a lot of people like it, but I didn't care reading about the Bennet family from any other hand than Jane Austen. However, what I've found that I get on quite well with is modern retellings of Jane Austen novels. I have read a few modern retellings of Jane Austen novels. I get off the... She just obscured me for a moment, which is really rude. Anyway, I've read a few modern retellings of Jane Austen novels that are aimed at adults, such as Aisha at Last by Usma Jalaluddin, Bridget Jones's Diary, obviously one of the originals of the genre. But I get on with modern retellings a lot more. And I noticed there's a lot of young adult modern retellings of Jane Austen novels. So early this year, I started actively looking for those. And I bought a lot. I have a whole pile. My goal is to get 2 retellings for each Jane Austen novels. And I want specifically young adult retellings. I'm not the biggest reader of YA in general, but I think that Jane Austen really lends itself to young adult retellings, because if you think about it, especially books like, Big Mansfield Park, it's basically a young adult novel already. You have a teenage protagonist, you have a lot of family drama, you have characters that live with their parents, you have all of that drama around first love. It's just perfect for young adult modern retellings. And so I was really gravitating to those this year, and I bought up a lot. I read a few before this Jane Austen July, but these were the 2 that I read during Jane Austen July. So let me talk about them. The first one I read is Ordinary Girls by Blair Thornburg. Can you guess, based on the cover, what that's a retelling of? I'll give the chat a few seconds for the lag to catch up. What do you think Ordinary Girls is a retelling of, based on the cover? The tagline says, "Aiming high, falling short." Vicky says, Sense and Sensibility. I mean, it is Sense and Sensibility. I'm not gonna... If you're all typing Sense and Sensibility now, Michelle says Northanger Abbey. That's incorrect. It is Sense and Sensibility. It is one of those retellings that doesn't stick too closely to the book. In fact, I'm going to go so far and say that if this wasn't advertised as a Sense and Sensibility retelling, you wouldn't actually be able to tell. It shares some of the same features, but actually very little of the plot of Sense and Sensibility. This is set in America, modern day America, and the first person protagonist is a 15-year-old girl who lives with her mother, widowed mother, and her older sister. And it's a book that deals with some of the same issues as Sense and Sensibility, such as hidden relationships, money problems, but it doesn't really follow through with the plot, which I get. A big part of Sense and Sensibility is like a 17-year-old having a secret relationship, then break up, fall in love with a guy who's 20 years older, and almost die of a cold. Like, it's hard to translate that into a modern setting. Blair Thornburg does an excellent job. This was one of the best young adult novels that I've read recently. I don't actually want to say too much about it because I have made a review video of this, which is going to be on my channel, I think later in August or in September. I can't remember exactly when it's scheduled, but it's already, it's already been reviewed and the review is ready to go. I really enjoyed this one, even though it's a very loose retelling of Sense and Sensibility. The second retelling I read in July is Emmett, which it does not take a genius to understand that this is a retelling of Emma. This was particularly interesting to read parallel to Emma, because unlike Blair Thornburg with Ordinary Girls, Elsie Rosen with Emmett stuck really quite closely to the plot of Emma. A tagline, if you can't see it on your screen, says charming, romantic, and gay as all get out. Yeah, it's fairly charming, romantic, and pretty gay. Also, can I just say what I love about the cover, and this is a detail that is in the book as well, is the yellow and blue checkered tie, which it has to be a reference to Clueless, right? It has to be a reference to Clueless. Emmett takes the opposite approach to Ordinary Girls. It sticks very closely to Emma. You can one-to-one link up characters from Emma and characters from Emmett. Much like Ordinary Girls, it's set in modern-day America. It's set at a very prestigious high school called Highbury High, or something along those lines. And it really follows the plot of Emma. It has some pacing issues, and it has an issue that I found a lot of modern YA retellings of Jane Austen novels have, and that is a lack of humor. One of the main things that draws me to Jane Austen is how funny she is, and Emmett doesn't quite hit the right notes. It's, lighthearted. It's got rom-com vibes, but it's not particularly funny. Whereas Ordinary Girls is actually quite funny, even though Sense and Sensibility, not the most humorous book of Jane Austen's. So anyway, you will get review videos for both of these books. I have recorded the review videos for both of them, and they are scheduled to go out at some point later in the year. But as far as young adult retellings of Jane Austen novels go, this was a success. I enjoyed both of these. I think we talked enough about them. You'll just have to wait for the review video for the fully thought out opinion. Let's move on to the next book I read. And this is for the challenge of reading a book written by a contemporary of Jane Austen. Now, the nerds among you will know this came out in 1819. So we're just a few years after Jane Austen's death. But obviously, Walter Scott is still a contemporary of Jane Austen. I have a complicated history with Walter Scott. Actually, it's not that complicated. I tried to read him once and I didn't like it. Some years ago, I tried to read The House of Midlothian, and I couldn't make it past the first few chapters. And so I stayed away from Walter Scott, despite him being a really important figure in the history of the English novel. Then this year in January, I made a list of authors I wanted to discover in 2025, new to me authors that I wanted to read. And he was on that list. So what better time to pick than Jane Austen July? And just to make sure I wasn't going to get disappointed again, I picked the big hit, the number one, the mainstream, biggest, most famous Walter Scott novel, arguably. And that's Ivanhoe. Ivanhoe is the origin of so many medieval story tropes, which I didn't quite realize as I went into it. because I'm lazy and I don't do research. I don't really look up what books are about before I read them. So all I knew about Ivanhoe was that it was set in medieval England. What I got was a really fun adventure that had so many of those medieval story tropes in them. It had, the knights. It had tournaments. It had witch trials. It had some casual anti-Semitism, which is obviously not the medieval trope I was there for, but, unfortunately, that is also part of Ivanhoe. It had, surprisingly, a Robin Hood cameo, which I also wasn't expecting. And when he showed up, and this is a very mild spoiler for Ivanhoe now coming up, when he showed up and it was like, and then a yeoman named Locksley was really good with the bow and arrow. And I was like, hang on, I know that name. Yeah, I know who Locksley really is. So yeah, it was good fun. It was more fun than I had expected. I enjoyed Ivanhoe, even though it's not, it's not as good as Jane Austen. It's not as good as Jane Austen, but it's a very different type of book. Ivanhoe is very indulgent. It's very epic in that it spends a lot of time describing everyone's clothing. It spends a lot of time describing, somewhat inaccurately in parts, the historical background to which it is set. But all of that kind of adds to the charm. Walter Scott is a very self-aware and self-indulgent author in that he knows he's telling a story. And he presents himself as a storyteller, and he presents the characters as figures, almost like on a stage. So there's several scenes where he sets the scene as if he was describing a play to you. And that's kind of fun. I could get on board with that. So yeah, I enjoyed Ivanhoe more than I thought I would. This is one where I'm still writing the review video because it's a long book and a complicated book, and I have a lot of complicated thoughts about it. But overall, I would say reading Ivanhoe was a success, and this is definitely not going to be the last Walter Scott novel that I read. There will be more, and I expect that he's going to end up on my Jane Austen July TBR in the future. We are done with the reading challenges. Let's get on to what I watched. Now, Emma 2020, Emma Dot, was the group watch for this year. I think this is the first time we've actually done a group watch, but we thought, in concurrence with Emma being the group read, we'll also have it being the group watch. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because Marissa from Blakeney Bookish, Katie from Books and Things, and that's the founders. That's not true. I'm not a founder. The hosts of Jane Austen July, it was Katie and Marissa who came up with it. I only joined in, I think, 1 or 2 years later. Anyway, so the hosts of Jane Austen July, we did a live watch and discussion of this. So we actually sat together as you can sit when you're in 3 different countries. And we watched Emma 2020. And we did a live discussion of it, where we just talked about our thoughts. My thoughts on Emma 2020 are that it's a great film. It's a really fun adaptation. They made a lot out of what's quite a long book and managed to squeeze that into feature film length. My favorite is forever going to be the miniseries adaptation of Emma. But if you're after an Emma film, this one's really well done. And it is, without a doubt, one of the most aesthetically pleasing Jane Austen adaptations. The dresses, the interiors, the whole design for this film is just gorgeous. And yeah, I enjoyed watching that. This is the second time I've watched it. And so this is definitely not a film I gravitate to, but I really enjoyed watching it again and discussing it. So if you go onto Katie's channel, Books and Things, you'll find our live discussion of this. And you can, you can see what we thought about it then. Let's move on. As well as watching Emma, I wanted to watch Jane Austen Wrecked My Life, which is this French film that came out last year and that has people talking about it. Do let me know in chat if you've watched Jane Austen Wrecked My Life and what you thought of it. Because unfortunately, I couldn't get hold of it. I tried all the methods, and I mean all the methods, and it's just not available where I live at the moment. I think it's going to be on some German streaming services this December or this autumn or something, but in July, I absolutely couldn't watch it yet. And sadly, therefore, I didn't manage to watch an updated version of a Jane Austen novel, which is what I wanted to do. Yeah, so has anyone in chat watched Jane Austen Wrecked My Life? Chat's gone a bit quiet, so I hope that I'm still live and all of that, and you can still, like, hear me. Okay. Martin said, I'm looking forward to Jane Austen Wrecked My Life. Yeah, me too. I've read some opinions on it that weren't particularly favorable, but I wonder if people were expecting a sort of remake of Austenland. And I have a feeling this film is going to be a lot more French than that, which might not be to everyone's taste. Yeah, so I'll watch it at some point, whenever I'm able to get a hold of it. And if it's interesting enough for me to make a video about, then I'll probably make a video about it. Although I have to tell you that making videos about films is a pain. This is a little spoiler for Spinster's Library. Last year in December, I made a video discussing the Hallmark movie adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. It's called Pride, Prejudice and Mistletoe. And I made a video about that last December, and it got copyright claimed. And then by the time the dispute was resolved in my favor, because obviously it's perfectly fair use to show clips of a movie if you're discussing a movie. And anyway, by the time it was resolved, it was already too late. So there's a video on my channel that you won't get to see until a year after it was made, because it's currently scheduled to go out in December of this year, even though I made it in December of last year because of copyright. So yeah, I'll make a video about Jane Austen Wrecked My Life if I have enough to say about it. And yeah, so I said, do you like Austenland? I watched it once. I like it for what it is, which is fun, a bit trashy. And look, if you know Spinster's Library, you know I don't use the word trashy as an insult, but it is a bit of a trashy film, and very predictable. I do prefer, when it comes to silly Jane Austen modern comedies, I do prefer Lost in Austen, which is a mini-series that came out in the early 2000s. I think it's 2004-ish. And it's just as ridiculous as Austenland, but I think funnier and has a more interesting concept. So Lost in Austen is about a Jane Austen superfan who accidentally ends up in Jane Austen's novel Pride and Prejudice, swapping places with Elizabeth Bennet. So Elizabeth Bennet is suddenly in the modern world, and then this woman who loves Jane Austen finds herself in the world of Pride and Prejudice. I prefer Lost in Austen when it comes to silly Austen comedies, but Austenland is fine. I don't love it as much as a lot of people do. Michelle says that film, as in Jane Austen Wrecked My Life, might be on Netflix. It wasn't when I last checked. And I checked both UK Netflix and German Netflix, and it wasn't on any of those. I think it is going to be released here, but it just hasn't yet. Martin says musicians get murdered on YouTube with copyright stuff. Honestly, it's a pain. Especially if you're using film clips that have music in them, then that's almost definitely going to get copyright strike. What bothers me about that is that it's all automated. So you have to go to a second round of dispute before you actually get a person looking at your case and deciding whether it's fair use or not. But it's much cheaper for YouTube to just be on the side of the copyright holder to begin with. You know what really bothered me? I made a video ages ago about songs that I had written. And then one of those songs was copyright claimed. And I listened to the song that the YouTube AI thought I had copied my song from. And it sounded nothing like mine. Absolutely nothing. No similarities at all. So yeah, I had to submit a copyright claim for literally a song that I wrote myself. Anyway, let's move on from that tangent. What's chat saying? Vicky says, I did enjoy Lost in Austen. Was wondering if those two are similar. Haven't seen Austenland yet. They're similar in that they're very silly Austen-themed rom-coms. They're not similar in the premise, right? Austenland is about an American woman coming to Britain to go to an Austen-themed resort experience that doesn't turn out to be as glamorous as she thought it was going to be. Whereas, so that's kind of a realist setting, right? That's not like fantasy. It's very over the top and it's very ridiculous. Sorry. But Lost in Austen is literally fantasy because the main character actually ends up in the fictional world of Jane Austen. So yeah, similar vibes though. And both worth watching. Michelle says, has anyone watched any of the Hallmark Austen films? Yeah, I said earlier, I made a video about the Hallmark Austen modernized adaptation called Pride, Prejudice and Mistletoe, which is a modern, American, gender-swapped, Christmas-themed Pride and Prejudice. And it's bad. So last year I made a video about that, which for copyright reasons won't be live on my channel until this year. So, you have to wait until December to, if you're interested in my full opinion on that. But yeah, it was certainly an experience. I made Bill watch it with me as well. And surprisingly, we're still married. Let's move on to some more pleasant watching that I did this year. I watched some BookTube. And these are just some of the videos that I watched. These are the ones I sort of remembered to write down. So I just wanted to recommend some. Now, I've not been... I should have put the links for these in the description box before I started this live stream. I haven't done that. But I will add them when the live stream's over. So if you check back later, there should be links in the description box to these videos. Let's talk about some of the videos I've watched on YouTube. And I also want to hear your recommendations. If you've seen any good videos in this Jane Austen July about Jane Austen, don't put links in the chat because YouTube will probably just straight up not show those. But do give the channel name and the video title if you remember it or what the video was about. Because I'm curious to see what BookTube was up to this Jane Austen July. So the first one we've got there at the top, on the top left, and that is chatting about Emma with Roz. Now, Roz is on the right of this thumbnail, and on the left is her daughter Matilda, and she runs the channel Tilly's Shelf, which is where you'll find this video. Tilly's Shelf is a channel that uploads very sporadically, let's say. Roz from Sky Dandling About the Books is much more frequent with her uploads, but every now and again they sit together and have a really fantastic, just a really fantastic chat about books. And here they sat together and talked about Emma. And I just love seeing those two together because both of them are very clever, funny, and they know Jane Austen's books inside out. So hearing them go off each other and discussing Emma is super fun. So if you've read Emma and you want to just hear some really wonderful, lovely discussion about it, then do check out this video, which is on Tilly's Shelf, but also features her mum, Roz. In the middle there, you'll see and recognize, of course, Katie from Books and Things. She has done so much on her channel this Jane Austen July. And it was kind of hard to pick just one video to feature on here, but I didn't want the whole wall to just be Katie. And so I picked her discussion on Miss Bates, continuing the Emma theme. Now, Katie does these discussions regularly where she takes one minor character in a Jane Austen novel and does a real deep dive on them. And her thoughts about Miss Bates were actually eye-opening. She draws parallels between, for example, Miss Bates and Jane Austen herself, which made me really think about the archetype of the spinster, which we don't really see that much in Jane Austen's novels. We have a lot of ridiculous older women like Mrs. Bennet, Mrs. Jennings, oh, obviously now I can't think of any others. There's a lot of them, but most of them are married. Whereas Miss Bates is notably a single older woman. And we don't see a lot of those in Jane Austen novels. So drawing parallels between Miss Bates and maybe Jane Austen herself is a really interesting approach. But even apart from that, Katie just does a fascinating deep dive on Miss Bates as a character, her function in the novel. She reads between the lines. She sees beyond the comic relief side character, and she sees beyond Miss Bates's function as a really hard lesson for Emma. Absolutely fantastic deep dive video on a single character. I would recommend all of those that Katie has done, but this year's turn was that of Miss Bates. And other than that, do check out Katie's channel in general for Jane Austen content this year. And a really, really cute video that she did was she asked a lot of booktubers to record little videos asking them what their favorite Jane Austen novel was and why. And if you're expecting a whole pile of Pride and Prejudice, you're only halfway right, because I think every single Jane Austen novel actually got a mention in that video. So yeah, it was just fun to have that bit of positivity about all of Jane Austen's novels and hearing why people love Sense and Sensibility or love Northanger Abbey and so on. That was really good. So the next channel, that's Amanda. I'm just gonna make sure I get the channel name right. Book Lover Amanda is her full channel name. She did a video called Books to Read If You Love Jane Austen. And she mostly recommends those types of retellings that I said I wasn't that keen on. Like, those crime novels that are set in Jane Austen's time, where the characters either solve crimes or, go on other fun adventures, the fan fiction type titles. So if you're into those sorts of books, she has a whole pile of recommendations there. And some that even I found interesting. So I'll check those out. And maybe I'll dip my toes into fan fiction style retellings of Jane Austen novels next year. No promises. The next one, that is from Tudor Smith, who has a lot of Jane Austen related discussion on his channel. But yeah, this July he did a deep dive on John Willoughby from Sense and Sensibility, which was similar to Katie's video, very fascinating, talking about aspects of John Willoughby that I honestly haven't thought that much about. John Willoughby I always think of as one of the less interesting characters in Sense and Sensibility, because he is very much a Jane Austen archetype. And I always sort of see him as a sort of watered down Mr. Wickham. But Tudor Smith definitely convinced me that there's a lot more to John Willoughby. And it was a fascinating deep dive into the details of his character, the way that he behaves, not just towards Marianne from Sense and Sensibility, but towards all the other characters, and really going deep into his motivations. Then, next up, we have Judging Jane Austen by Her Covers. This is, of course, from Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, the other co-host of Jane Austen. And she also has several Jane Austen July videos, so do check out her channel if you haven't had a look at her yet. One of the things she did is she actually got her husband to read Emma and give his opinion on it. But the video that I wanted to highlight from Marissa is this Jane Austen book cover videos. If you're familiar with my channel, you know I love a good discussion on book covers. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. And Marissa's opinions are almost diametrically opposed to mine. She presents this book, which is called Jane Austen Covered Cover, if I remember correctly. Also a fairly recent release, a sort of coffee table book that shows different covers of Jane Austen novels through the years. And all of the covers that she found ugly, I found amazing, and the other way around. So we have very different opinions on it, but I still enjoyed watching Marissa give her view on covers, cover trends, in particular throughout the years, and just her analysis of those book covers. So if you, like me, enjoy looking at a book cover, ugly or beautiful, and you like someone talking about it, then do check out her video. And finally, we have Michelle says, please do a book cover video for Georgette Heyer. Some of them are awful. I think all of the ones that I have are awful, but like in that way that I like, that sort of trashy mid-century romance novel way. So I might well do a book cover video on Georgette Heyer. I don't think I could pick out just one of her books and do a book cover video on that because there aren't enough book covers. But yeah, maybe I'll just pick some of the worst Georgette Heyer book covers and do a video on that. I like that idea. I probably need to read more Georgette Heyer first though, because I've only read 2 of her novels. Yeah, the last one is, I want to make sure I get that video channel name correctly as well. It's Miranda Mills, who did a video that looks similar to Amanda's video, Jane Austen July book recommendations, but her video focuses a lot more on non-fiction, all sorts of non-fiction about Jane Austen, biographical, analytical, non-fiction about Jane Austen's books, but also about history. There's a lot of non-fiction books that she's read and that she recommends. So if you are after recommendations in the non-fiction space, she does have a little section at the end where she talks about fiction books, but honestly, most of her video is taken up with non-fiction recommendations. Then you'll definitely find some good recs in her video. Nancy says, I love Georgette Heyer. I read The Unknown Ajax and Frederica for Jane Austen July. I read The Unknown Ajax a few years ago for Jane Austen July. And then last year, I read Venetia. I really liked both of those novels. I enjoyed Venetia a bit more than The Unknown Ajax. No, that's not true. I enjoyed Venetia a lot more than The Unknown Ajax, but I like both. And Frederica is one of those titles that keeps coming up as one of the best Georgette Heyer novels. So yeah, I'll definitely return to Georgette Heyer. There's no doubt about it. There's so much of her writing to discover, and I'm really looking forward to it. And this year, I didn't read any Georgette Heyer, but I probably will again next year. Okay, do we have much left? Oh yeah, of course. This is where I will get a bit self-indulgent, and I'll tell you what I created in Jane Austen July. Because, yes, I made some videos. So I made 4 book review videos, and full disclosure, none of these were actually made in July. The first book review video I made for this Jane Austen July, I actually recorded in February. I've been planning this a while. 3 of those book review videos are about YA modern retellings of Jane Austen books. That's Pride by Evie Zaboy, Seeking Mansfield by Kate Watson, and Fresh by Margot Wood. I'm not going to talk about these books again. You can literally just go on my channel and watch those reviews. The 4th one, A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall, is a modern, as in came out a few years ago, Regency romance. So until now, my whole experience of Regency romance was Georgette Heyer. So I dipped my toes into some modern Regency romance, quite liked it. I'm not going to go into detail on these videos. If you're interested in them, then you can just click on my channel and find them all. There's even a playlist of Jane Austen July content for this year. As well as those 4 book review videos, I also made 5 other videos for Jane Austen July. And these are the ones that I'm actually quite pleased with. I did a few video essays. I made one video with the title Is Mary Bennet Autistic, which I'm particularly fond of because I interviewed Bill for that, and I interviewed Bill's mum. Bill is only vaguely aware of Mary Bennet. No, that's not true. He probably knows more about Mary Bennet than most people who haven't read Pride and Prejudice. But he gave his opinion as an autistic adult who is vaguely aware of Mary Bennet's existence. And his mum is actually a Jane Austen fan and also works with autistic adults. So it was really interesting to interview both of them on this question: is Mary Bennet autistic? It's not actually, the video doesn't actually answer the question. It's more of a deep dive into the topic of representation and of why people identify Mary Bennet as autistic. And yeah, I'm quite pleased with it. Please do check it out. I think it's a good video. Also features Minerva a lot, if you need any extra motivation. I did a discussion video on Northanger Abbey, which started off as a review video. I just wanted to do a review video of Northanger Abbey, and then I realized I had a lot to say about it. And so it turned into a discussion video where I'm just hype about Northanger Abbey, possibly the most underrated Jane Austen novels. The Jane Austen Industrial Complex was a video that emerged during my holiday in Bath that we'll get to. I just ended up with a lot of thoughts about Jane Austen as fandom, about the connections between Jane Austen readership and commercialization and, all of that stuff. So it's not directly about Jane Austen's books, but it's about all the stuff around Jane Austen's books, such as the lovely Mr. Darcy rubber duck that you can see in the thumbnail picture. Reacting to your unpopular Jane Austen opinions is exactly what it says. It's just me taking some fun opinions about Jane Austen's novels that I found on the internet and reacting to them. It's very fun. It's very silly. It's not very deep. And the last one, Can We Please Be Normal, about Book Talk editions of classics, my most recent video, that's one I actually made in July. And it's about as you can see, the new Penguin editions of Jane Austen's novels that have sparked a lot of discussion online. They are very obviously inspired by young adult fiction, and they're more obviously inspired by #book talk. And yeah, I have some thoughts about it. As you can imagine, I always have opinions on Jane Austen book covers. You'll find all of these videos in my Jane Austen July playlist. So if you go on my channel, if you go on playlists, there'll be one called Jane Austen July 2025, and you'll find all of these videos. Watch them if you're interested in. I'm really pleased with all the ones on this page because, yeah, I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts, and I think I managed to put them in video form in quite a nice way. Martin asks, is the pump room still in Bath? Well, Martin, we'll get to that in a minute. Let's move on, because yeah, I did travel. Not in July, so this is technically not Jane Austen July Wrap-Up, but in May, I did in fact travel to Bath, and look what's there. It's the pump room. Yeah, and you see that on the left picture. It's kind of funny because if you go to Bath, you'll see a sign that says, pump room, and it says entry with like an afternoon tea that costs something like £50 a person, or a dinner that's like £70 a person. And Bill and I arrived in Bath and we looked at that and we're like, no, I guess we'll just not see the pump room then. And then we just walked into the Bath World Heritage Centre, which is this tiny little, I can't even call it a museum, it's just a sort of room with a guy standing there, excited to tell you all about what Bath has to offer. And he gave us a little brochure and said, you know what, with that, if you go around the back way and you go past the no entry sign and you show this brochure to some random woman who's standing there, they will let you into the pump room. So that's what we did. And I took this picture in the pump room of the pump while people were having their £50 afternoon teas in the background. It was a bit awkward because we were like, we shouldn't be here. But yeah, I managed to take a few pictures. I drank the water, would not recommend, tastes horrible. But you have to do it, right, for the experience. On the right, you see Bath Abbey, which I don't know how I managed to take this picture with no one there, because about 5 seconds after this, it was full of tourists. And we were some of them, no shame in that. And here's some more pictures of Bath. You can see a park there. Do you see that brown structure in that photo? That's a book, which at the time that we were there you couldn't really tell what was on there, but now they've turned this into this really cute looking floral memorial. It basically says Jane Austen on it. So it's all in bloom now. And like you just see some random house. I don't know whose house it is. Probably Mr. Tilney's. Yeah. So I ended up in Bath by accident. Well, not by accident, by surprise. Bill gave me flight tickets to Manchester for my birthday last year. And I didn't know where we'd be going. The flight tickets were to Manchester. But I thought, I'm not going to get a week in Manchester as a birthday present. That's a bit weird. Nothing against Manchester. Manchester's lovely. But I had the suspicion that we weren't going to stay there. So we ended up on the train. We were in Birmingham, and I thought, okay, are we just visiting in-laws? That didn't happen. We continued on towards Bristol. I thought, are we going to Bristol? And then we got off in Bristol. And I had the suspicion, because there was a train there that was going to go to Bath. And then I knew we were going to Bath. So yes, it was a lovely birthday surprise. And in fact, anniversary surprise, because it was our 10-year anniversary this year. And so we just had a lovely week in Bath. You can see us there having a lovely time in the hotel restaurant. You can see us there having a lovely time in the rain. It rained a lot. But still, it was just fantastic to see the town in which 2 Jane Austen novels are set. And I had been to Bath before once, but for a funeral, so that wasn't the best occasion for sightseeing. This time, I came there as a tourist and just keen to take everything in. And I loved it. We went to see... okay, sorry. First, you have to look at a picture. I was eating and drinking. Yeah, we had afternoon tea. I think this was the first time in my life I had macarons. It's kind of sad, isn't it? And we had a lot of cocktails. We had a lot of tea, and we had a lot of cocktails, and we had a lot of breakfasts. But there's some really good breakfast places in Bath, if you like a full English, which admittedly I do. But we also went to do some Jane Austen related tourism. And some of that I'm actually talking about in the video about Jane Austen commercialization. So, there's a lot more sort of Bath pictures and videos in that. But yeah, these 2 are from the Jane Austen Centre, which is fun. It's, as far as museums go, quite unserious in that it's staffed by people who are acting like actors who are acting like Jane Austen characters. So like the tour guide was Isabella Thorpe, and she was, hilarious and very cute. And then the gift shop was staffed by John Willoughby. The guy at the door was Mr. Bennett. You get the idea. It's really fun. I found out later that Katie from Books and Things actually worked there as well. Which I can so see her in this setting, in a bonnet, just like knowing everything about Jane Austen, like she does. The Jane Austen Centre was quite fun. You see me on the left there, next to the costume from the Northanger Abbey film. And you can see Bill on the right next to the waxwork of Jane Austen that they have there. Then, and this was really the main birthday present, we went to see Lucy Worsley, as I alluded to earlier. She gave this talk about Jane Austen's life in Bath. You can see us there taking a sort of blurry picture. We were sat in the front row. And she didn't want any filming, recording, or pictures during the talk. So obviously we respected that. And we just took a picture of the empty stage before she got on. It was interesting. But like I said, if you want more of my impressions from that, do watch that video with the Mr. Darcy Rowe duck in the thumbnail. I think this is all I have to say about this Jane Austen July. And it's been over an hour. I've not stopped talking. So, I don't think there's much else to say about that. You'll see a lot more. No, not a lot more. You'll see some more Jane Austen related videos coming up, because obviously reading Jane Austen now in July has given me some ideas for future videos. One future video might be about Jane Austen games. So board games, maybe video games. That's still very much unformed. You'll get another, like I said, the video in December about the Hallmark movie adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. And you'll get the book reviews for the books that I read in Jane Austen July. And that's all coming up in the next weeks and months. So I'm really sad to finish this Jane Austen July. It was probably the most fun I've had in Jane Austen July. I was just so into it this year. I really took the time and immersed myself in Jane Austen. I loved being on the group, on the Discord, and seeing people's discussions and stuff. I hope you enjoyed Jane Austen July as well. Do check out definitely the videos by my co-hosts and also the other videos that I will add to the description box like in the next hour. And I'll see you again next year for Jane Austen July. Then I'll see you again quite soon on this channel. Thank you for watching. Bye. Now we get to the awkward stage where I have to find the end stream button.